Chapter 10 Unavoidable, Part 1. Newlywed lawyer HeYiSheng was busier than ever before. The cases he had taken earlier were still ongoing, and recently, due to personal connections, he had taken on a tricky new case as well. Several cases were progressing simultaneously, and he found himself working late into the night every day. Often, Mosheng would fall asleep while waiting for him, and his study room's light would still be on. Despite this, Mosheng felt very happy. When Yichen was busy, she would find things to do on her own, keeping herself occupied. Occasionally, she would peek into his study, but Yichen was always engrossed in his work without exception. At such a close distance, Mosheng truly understood how diligent Yichen was. People saw HeYiSheng as young and successful, which evoked envy, but they had no idea how much effort he put into things behind the scenes. As someone without a powerful background, it must have been very difficult for him to reach his current position. However, during his toughest times, she wasn't by his side. When Yichen came out of his study holding an empty teacup, he saw Mosheng sitting on the couch, holding a cookbook and lost in thought. It was now Sunday afternoon. Yichen had been busy in his study all morning, hastily eating lunch before returning to work. Seeing him, Mosheng immediately put down the book and jumped up from the couch. "I'll make tea." Happily, she took his cup and ran to the kitchen. As Yichen looked at his empty hand, he suddenly felt a sense of time rewinding. It seemed like he had returned to the past, during their university days when he was busy with studies, work, and student council activities, and Mosheng would slip into his busy schedule. Although it seemed like Mosheng had occupied a lot of his time, in reality, he hadn't devoted much of it to her. Now, it felt like history was repeating itself. When Mosheng brought the hot tea to the study, Yichen pulled her over. "Do you have plans for the afternoon?" "What for? Are we going out?" Mosheng's eyes lit up, filled with excitement. The look of anticipation erased any lingering doubts in Yichen's mind. He turned off his computer. "Well, it's the centennial celebration of C University today. The law firm has made some donations to the law school, and Lao Yuan is attending the donation ceremony. He's been encouraging me and Xiangheng to join the celebration. I'm not that keen on going, given the heavy workload, but now I'm a bit undecided." For such a lively event, Mosheng naturally wanted to go. When Yichen and Mosheng arrived at the university, the place was so crowded that the car couldn't get in. Yichen parked the car in a distant parking lot, and they walked to the campus. "Wait a moment." Halfway there, Mosheng stopped and pointed to the roadside stalls selling t-shirts with C University printed on them. "Yichen, shall we get these?" Yichen frowned, finding the idea quite odd, but Mosheng held his hand and refused to move, so he helplessly said, "You go ahead and buy." Mosheng had rushed out of the house in the morning without her wallet, so she took some money from Yichen's wallet and successfully came back with 2 t-shirts from the crowd. Both of them were now dressed in casual sweaters. Mosheng wore the C University t-shirt on top of her loose sweater, making her look chubby and a bit funny. On the other hand, Yichen, with the same dressing style, still looked elegant and imposing, attracting the attention of passing girls. It seemed like it had always been this way. Back in their college days, Yichen was always the center of attention, and he appeared indifferent to those gazes. Mosheng tugged at his sleeve. "Yichen, don't you feel like someone is watching you?" Yichen glanced at her. "Don't look around while walking." Mosheng fell silent. Perhaps she was the one being too expressive. As they walked to the school gate, Yichen received a call from Xiangheng. "Are you at home or the law firm? Come out, many classmates have come today." Su Min said if you didn't show up, she would go to your house and drag you here. Su Min was Yichen's previous student union president in the law school, who stayed at the university after graduation. Yichen had frequent interactions with her during their time at school. I'm at the North Gate. Where are you guys? Oh, you're here. That's great. We are at the new building. Come over quickly. Yichen hung up and said to Mosheng, let's first walk around our department and then go to yours. Huh? Our department? I'm not going. Mosheng hesitated for a moment. Why? Yichen became alert. He almost forgot that there might be some situations with so many people around. After all these years, he realized he still had certain conditioned reflexes. There are so many people from our department. Mosheng mumbled. Yichen used to be a prominent figure in the law school, and many people knew about their on-again off-again relationship back then. She didn't want to face those inquisitive gazes. You can go alone then. Besides, I want to take some photos, and I feel more inspired alone. If that's the case, why did he bother to come out? Yichen was a bit helpless as he held Mosheng back. You didn't bring money. How are you going to find me later, and how will you get home tonight? Seeing Mosheng's embarrassed expression, he knew she hadn't considered these points. Sometimes, he felt like he was taking care of a child. He sighed, it's better if our future children take after me. Ignoring his digression, Mosheng extended her hand, give me some money. Yichen only handed her his own money, I'll call you later. Don't wander too far. If you need me, call Xiangheng. I really don't understand what you're afraid of. Yichen smoothed her hair that the wind had messed up. He knew how Mosheng felt, but these things were trivial. He could just follow her lead. Yichen, now that you're famous, you've become quite arrogant. As soon as Yichen arrived at the law school's new building, he was met with mockery from Su Min. Knowing her senior's temperament, Yichen knew that the more he argued, the more spirited she would become. So, he didn't bother defending himself, and Su Min's taunt stopped after a few words. Xiangheng looked at his outfit, when did you become so stylish? Yichen looked down at himself. The t-shirt with the big red letters, C University, did look quite foolish. He smiled and took it off, holding it in his hand. Xiangheng immediately understood, why didn't you bring that girl with you? Who knows where she went? Yichen also felt a headache. As they were talking, many acquaintances came over to greet them. While they were chatting, Su Min pulled Lao Yuan to the side. Does Yichen have a girlfriend? Lao Yuan rubbed his chin and confidently answered, no. A wife wasn't the same as a girlfriend, he made that distinction very clear. Why is he still the same? He's still wholeheartedly waiting for someone else. Su Min knew quite a lot about Yichen's past and couldn't help but be a bit disdainful. But it's okay if he doesn't have one. There's a new young female teacher in our department. She's beautiful, from a good family, and has a high educational background. I'll invite her for dinner tonight and introduce them. You don't say anything, okay? Lao Yuan naturally kept quiet, looking very pleased. Originally, Yichen had planned to greet them and leave, but unexpectedly, he couldn't escape. First, they visited a few professors together, then attended an alumni forum. By the time they left the building, it was almost 5 o'clock. Lao Yuan invited some familiar faces to have a meal at the Binjiang Grand Hotel. The Binjiang Grand Hotel was the only 5-star hotel near the university, and it seemed like Lao Yuan was about to spend a lot of money. Yichen borrowed Lao Yuan's phone and called Mosheng. In truth, Mosheng had no specific plans for taking photos. She had simply grabbed her camera on her way out. Yichen went to the law school, while Mosheng headed towards her own department. Due to her average score in the college entrance exam, she was assigned to the chemistry department, which didn't have many advantages in C University. Moreover, her worst subject was chemistry, and it was all thanks to Yichen that she managed to pass every course in her first year. Mosheng had only stayed in the chemistry department for a little over a year before frequently studying at the law school, so she wasn't very familiar with her own department. She wandered around the chemistry department but didn't run into anyone she knew. Leaving the chemistry department, she randomly took a couple of photos, feeling a bit bored. Her hand touched the money in her pocket, and she couldn't help but think of Yichen. She wondered what he was doing in the law school. Recently, she and Yichen seemed to have suddenly become closer, especially after her return from Hong Kong. The way they were getting along now made Mosheng happy, but sometimes she felt uneasy. She couldn't quite understand Yichen's thoughts. Actually, it had always been like this. She could never quite figure out what was on his mind. Would everything go back to the way it was one day? Mosheng didn't want to dwell on these thoughts anymore and kicked at the dirt on the ground while muttering to herself, "Since I can't figure it out, I'd better keep things simple." C University was livelier than ever today, with people everywhere, young students and old alumni with white hair. This land had witnessed the youth of countless people. Perhaps because Mosheng was wearing a t-shirt with C University printed on it, people often approached her to ask for directions or where certain buildings were located. Mosheng would answer their questions based on her memory. As she walked, a young man in a suit stopped her. "Excuse me, do you know where Ying Hui is giving his speech?" Mosheng was stunned by the question, almost doubting whether she had heard it correctly. "Ying Hui? Who are you talking about?" Mosheng asked, bewildered. Ying Hui, the internet sensation from China, the CEO of So. He's giving a speech here. The young man looked anxious, and seeing Mosheng's confusion, he immediately turned to another student and asked the same question. "In the first grand auditorium. Why are you going now? The speech started at 2 and goes until 4. You won't be able to squeeze in." Although she said that, the female student still pointed out the direction to him. The young man hurriedly thanked her and ran towards the first grand auditorium. Mosheng stood there, taking some time to process the information. Ying Hui. He had returned to China. And he was at C University now. The first grand auditorium, which could accommodate thousands of people, was already packed. Fortunately, the university had set up electronic screens outside to broadcast the speech. Mosheng stood among the crowd, looking up at the confident and eloquent man on the screen. He had a broad forehead symbolizing wisdom, strong and determined eyebrows reflecting his personality, a face with sharp lines that lacked gentleness, yet showed the calmness and occasional sharpness of someone who had experienced life's trials. This was Ying Hui, the self-made internet tycoon from Silicon Valley. The emerging tech billionaire worth billions of dollars. Her nominal ex-husband, perhaps, her actual one as well. The topic of Ying Hui's speech was ordinary, the development and forecast of China's IT industry. However, his unique perspective, powerful analysis, and special identity made his speech stand out. Due to his background in science and engineering, Ying Hui emphasized factual evidence. The future of IT that he depicted was not a fantasy but a logical deduction based on feasible foundations, making his speech more convincing. His legendary success story also excited the audience. Furthermore, his handsome appearance, or more precisely, his robust and resolute handsomeness, elicited screams from female students amid the applause. At least among the crowd outside the auditorium, a group of female students had been captivated by Ying Hui's charisma and charm. "He's so handsome. I would even accept him if he were older." Come on. Who said he's old? He's only 34, in his prime. If I had a husband like him, he'd be talented, successful, and good-looking. I'd proudly show him off. Forget it. If you wanted to marry someone like him, you should have done it before he became successful. It's too late now. Hey, did you hear? When Hui was still a student here, he had a girlfriend who was considered the campus beauty in our department. This statement attracted the attention of others who had been focusing on the speech. What department are you guys from? A male student asked. Foreign languages. And now? Are they still together? I just heard it from someone else. It might not be true. The female student emphasized, then continued, during university, Hui was very poor, coming from a rural background and was famous for being talented in the mathematics department, which was filled with geniuses. Later, he pursued the recognized campus beauty in our department, and they had a good relationship. Unfortunately, when they graduated, the beauty accepted the pursuit of the department head's son to secure a position at the university. Hui then gave up his job offer from a domestic research institute and went abroad. Ah, the department head's son's wife. Are you talking about the one who taught us British literary history? I heard she got divorced recently. Oh my, you think she regrets it now? Who knows? The girl stuck out her tongue. We heard this during the dinner when we won the scholarship, and the counselor said it, so it's quite reliable. The chattering discussion continued heatedly, as people were always interested in celebrities' past and privacy. Mosheng pursed her lips, looking up at the confident Hui on the screen. Hui rarely mentioned his past to her, perhaps because she was still a young girl of 23 or 24, and he regarded her as a little sister. Only once, Hui had casually mentioned, I had a girlfriend at C University before. She was very smart and beautiful. He stopped there, seeming to be unconsciously nostalgic. At that time, Mosheng didn't know what to say, so she replied, my ex-boyfriend was also amazing. Oh. Hui laughed, your ex. Boyfriend didn't have my luck. Mosheng still remembered the look in his eyes at that moment, a mix of contradictions, melancholy, and pride, deep within his usually calm gaze. Over these years, she hadn't seen anyone buying Ji's side. Maybe he was like her, unable to let go of people from the past. Mosheng thought in a daze. Unconsciously, the speech was coming to an end. The last scene on the electronic screen was the students rushing up to the podium and surrounding Hui. Then, the broadcast stopped, and the promotional video for C University's centennial celebration began. The crowd that had gathered outside the auditorium gradually dispersed, and Mosheng followed the crowd. Suddenly, she remembered the last conversation she had with Hui when she was returning to the US, and he saw her off at the airport. If you don't go back to the US, then let's not contact each other for now. It wasn't that there were no regrets, they could have been good friends. If so many things hadn't happened. Her chest felt stuffy, and Mosheng felt a bit dizzy. In this carefree, sunny afternoon, the buried emotions resurfaced because of Hui's appearance, like a nightmare replaying. The fear of being in a foreign land, the embarrassment of not being able to communicate, the anger of being discriminated against, the silence she gradually got used to because of the mockery of her accent, and then the despair when she saw her father's suicide in the newspaper after 2 months in the US. At that time, everything felt like a web woven by demons, and she couldn't break free, engulfed in endless despair. Chapter 10, No Avoidance, Part 2. Two little tigers, running fast. The sudden sound of two little tigers ringing out brought Mosheng out of her daydreams. This slightly childish ringtone was picked by Mosheng when Yichen was too busy to pay attention to her. Although Yichen frowned for a long time after hearing it, he never changed it back. The ringtone rang twice before Mosheng answered the call. Mosheng. The moment Yichen's low and mellow voice sounded, Mosheng couldn't understand why she felt a kind of emotion similar to being moved. It was as if a warm breeze had blown through her heart, making the whole world tranquil and benevolent. Her eyes became moist. Yichen, I miss you so much. Mosheng heard herself say, or rather, the version of herself that was Zhao Mosheng in a foreign country, speaking to Yichen. I miss you so much. Yichen, do you know? Once, standing on a foreign street, surrounded by unfamiliar skin colors, I couldn't even catch a glimpse of your back. Now, I can finally tell you that I miss you so much. The accumulated tears in her eyes finally overflowed. There was no sound from the other end of the phone. Only the quiet breaths of each other and the distant noise of cars remained. After a moment, Lao Yuan's loud voice came from the other end. Yichen, why did you stop while walking? You're standing in the middle of the road. Yichen was startled and coughed lightly. I got it. The distinguished lawyer stumbled over his words for a moment. Where are you? Mosheng looked around. I don't know. After the speech ended, she followed the crowd, but now she had lost track of where she was. Lost? No wonder. Yichen's voice sounded hoarse. All right, just come to the Binjiang Grand Hotel across from the north gate of the university. I'll wait for you at the hotel entrance. Binjiang Grand Hotel. The table that Lao Yuan reserved somehow got taken by someone else. The lobby manager kept apologizing, saying they would arrange another one as soon as possible. The group of people didn't mind and sat in the lobby, chatting and waiting. Apart from Su Min, Lao Yuan also invited a few friends he used to hang out with. After entering society, they didn't have many opportunities to get together, so now they finally had a chance to chat and have fun. Su Min took the opportunity to introduce the female teacher she had brought along to Yichen. Although the male lead seemed a bit absent-minded, seeing the shy and occasionally glancing looks from the female teacher towards him, Su Min was secretly pleased. At least half of her plan seemed to be working out. As they were talking, Xiang Heng, who was sitting by the window, suddenly stood up and stared outside. Yichen, who was sitting across from him, subconsciously turned his head and saw a large truck dangerously brushing past Zhao Mosheng, who was barely standing with a frightened and pale face. Relieved that she was safe, Xiang Heng said with lingering fear, Yichen, your wife is really scary. She just crossed the road without paying attention to the red light. Before he could finish his sentence, Yichen had already stood up with a cold face and walked out. Su Min, who saw Zhao Mosheng's face from a distance, was taken aback and asked Old Yuan, wife? What does he mean? Old Yuan chuckled, wife means wife, not girlfriend. The young female teacher looked puzzledly at Su Min, as if asking why she was introducing her to someone who was already married. Su Min felt awkward and glared at Old Yuan. In the distance, Yichen held Zhao Mosheng's hand and walked ahead. As they crossed the road, he let go of her hand and stood by the flower bed, seemingly giving her a stern talking to. Xiang Heng smiled, recalling the past. It had been a long time since he had seen such a scene. Yichen was always mature and composed during his university days, seldom losing his temper, except when it came to Zhao Mosheng. Whenever she did something wrong, he would scold her for a long time. It brings back memories, Xiang Heng said, his eyes filled with a gentle smile. He couldn't help feeling happy for his junior brother. Su Min shook her head and said, back in our law school, there were so many talented and beautiful girls. Many of them liked him, but he ended up with someone from another department. I told him he should have chosen a department's beauty queen to match his status as the law school's #1 talent, but she doesn't have anything special. During the time Mo pursued Yi Sheng, most of the law school students watched the pursuit with amusement. No one believed that Yi Sheng would accept this girl, especially when he had rejected others with better conditions. So when Yi Sheng started bringing Mo to class and self-study sessions, many people were surprised. Some regretted not being more proactive back then. After Mo went to the United States and Yi Sheng became single again, some new female students showed even greater enthusiasm, but Yi Sheng managed to get rid of them in just a few days. Once, Su-min couldn't help asking him, "You hate it when others pursue you, but how come you didn't hate Mo back then?" She regretted saying that immediately, realizing it was too impulsive. She never thought Yi Sheng would answer her. "That's different," Yi Sheng said back then, simply and calmly, just 3 words. Su-min couldn't figure out what was different. Perhaps it was because he gave Mo a chance to pursue him, but not others. Old Yuan interjected, "When it comes to matters of the heart, only the person involved knows best. Don't worry about it." As Yi Sheng and Mo approached, Yi Sheng still had a serious expression, while Mo looked like she had been scolded and her greetings to everyone were quieter. Mo used to be a frequent visitor to the department office, so she naturally knew Su-min. Seeing her, Mo greeted her, "Hello, senior sister." Su-min responded with a forced and was about to say something when she was interrupted by a surprised voice. "Mrs. In." The loud and enthusiastic voice suddenly silenced the noisy lobby. The not-so-fluent English caused some laughter, but the well-dressed middle-aged man, who was the center of attention, was completely unaware. He rushed through the lobby and came to Mo, who was standing there stunned. "Mrs. In, Mrs. In. Mr. Ying's wife." The middle-aged man was so excited that he was speaking incoherently. "I didn't expect to see you here. You and Mr. Ying came back to the country together. I am Lin Xianghe, the chairman of Dashi Corporation. Do you remember me? Last year, when I was in the United States, you and Mr. Ying hosted me. Now that you two have returned, I must entertain you as well." Mo was dumbfounded. She recognized this middle-aged man. He had business dealings with Ying Hui's company. When he came to the United States last year, Ying Hui had invited him and his wife to a banquet at their home. But why would she meet him here, at the worst time and in the worst place? Feeling the suspicious and surprised gazes of old Yuan and others fixed on her, Mo couldn't summon the courage to look at Yi Sheng's expression. However, in the next moment, a warm and powerful hand held her slightly trembling hand. The same hand that had angrily pulled her across the road. But now, it held her with a comforting strength, tightly grasping her hand. Mo slowly turned her head and saw Yi Sheng looking at her, his eyes filled with pain and calmness. He had already figured it out, hadn't he? Sure enough. Mo heard Yi Sheng's clear and calm voice. "I apologize, she is no longer. You've mistaken the person." The unfinished words were swiftly interrupted by Mo, leaving Yi Sheng puzzled with a hint of confusion in his eyes. Mo gently freed her hand from his grip and repeated to Chairman Lin, "You've mistaken the person." Her voice was surprisingly calm. Although she knew she would eventually have to face that marriage, it was definitely not the right time, nor in front of so many of Yi Sheng's friends. Yi Sheng might be able to endure it, but she didn't want him to be subject to other people's gossip and judgment because of her past. Yi Sheng had always been so proud. Mistaken? How could that be? Hee, Mrs. Ng, don't tease me. Chairman Lin awkwardly laughed, feeling a bit embarrassed but unwilling to leave. During the standoff, the hotel door was pushed open. The uniform welcome from the waiter and the imposing presence of the newcomer captured everyone's attention. Accompanied by a large group, a handsome young man walked in, carrying a precious handmade suit in his hands. He exuded an aura of confidence and calmness with each step, and the bright lights in the lobby added to his distinguished appearance. Su Min noticed someone from C University among them and couldn't help but take a few more glances. However, she couldn't figure out who the man in the middle was, to make the school leaders be so eager to please him. At this moment, Chairman Lin shouted joyfully, waving his hand, "Mr. Ng, Mrs. Ng is here." The word Mr. Ng reminded Su Min of someone in an instant, Ng Hui, the CEO of So-So, the one who donated a building to the university. As Lin called out, Ng Hui stopped and turned to look at them, followed by the people around him. He stood still for a few seconds, raised his eyebrows, and then walked straight towards them. It was as if he hadn't noticed Mosheng, who was standing there unable to react. Ng Hui walked past her and greeted Chairman Lin politely. "Oh, it's Chairman Lin. I was planning to visit you tomorrow, but I didn't expect to meet you here." Chairman Lin, with delight, said, "Oh, how can that be? It's an honor to meet Mr. Ng." "Ha, Mr. Ng, this is Mrs. Ng, but just now, Mrs. Ng insisted that I had mistaken the person." He pointed at Mosheng. Ng Hui glanced casually at Mosheng, then laughed. "She does resemble someone, but my wife is on vacation in Switzerland." "Chairman Lin, it seems your eyesight is not so good." "Ha. Ha." Chairman Lin suspiciously glanced at Mosheng but quickly said, Yes, you are right. Now that I look again, she doesn't really look alike." He then repeatedly bowed to Mosheng. "I'm sorry for mistaking you, Mississippi. I'm really sorry." Mosheng lowered her eyes and shook her head slightly. "Since we just met by chance, Chairman Lin, would you mind joining us for a meal?" Of course. As Ng Hui and Chairman Lin gradually walked away while talking, Mosheng raised her head and saw Yi Chen looking at Ng Hui's departing figure, his deep eyes filled with complicated emotions. Sensing her anxious gaze, Yi Chen looked away, lowered his head, and spoke to her, his tone much gentler than when he scolded her on the roadside. However, there was still a hint of seriousness. "Think about how to write your reflection when we get home." Mosheng looked at him dumbfounded, her mind in a jumble. Yi Chen took the cigarette from old Yuan and said, "How to cross the road, I just told you. How could you forget so quickly?" Mosheng remained silent. Ng Hui and his group were led by the waiter to a private elevator. Right before the elevator doors closed, Ng Hui seemed to glance casually at their direction and coincidentally locked eyes with Yi Chen's deep gaze. This brief incident left everyone unsure how to react, but seeing Yi Chen looking unperturbed, they quickly resumed chatting and laughing. They didn't doubt the couple's relationship, given Ng Hui's identity. If Yi Chen and Mosheng were really married, that would be truly incredible. The hotel manager soon informed them of a vacant table and expressed apologies for the inconvenience caused by their delay, offering an 80% discount on everything except the beverages as a compensation. Old Yuan was instantly delighted, calculating the money they saved. The atmosphere at the table became lively as they talked about many funny incidents from their time at the law school. Even though Mosheng was preoccupied with her thoughts, she couldn't help but laugh occasionally when she heard something amusing. Some people even recalled the jokes Mosheng made during criminal law class and used them to tease her. Mosheng felt embarrassed and asked Yi Chen quietly how he knew about those things, considering they were not in the same year. Yichen smiled and said, "Don't you know you're famous?" Professor Zhou even mentioned Mosheng during classes for the following years, telling the story of a girl who attended his class with her boyfriend, and how she was unexpectedly chosen to answer a question. He recounted the incident with great enthusiasm, often making the students burst into laughter. There was even a junior who wasn't very familiar with Yichen, asking him in a friendly manner, "Are you the boyfriend of that girl who wanted to lock up people? Hee, why have I never seen your girlfriend?" But Mosheng was no longer there at that time. After being filled with drinks by old Yuan, Yichen stood up to go to the restroom. Following the waiter's directions, he found the restroom and pushed the door open. However, there was already someone inside. At the moment when Yichen entered, the man washing his hands straightened up. Yichen subconsciously halted, meeting the man's gaze in the mirror. Yinghui. For a moment, silence enveloped the small restroom. "How, Yichen?" After a moment, Yinghui spoke first. "I've heard of your name." I dare not." Yichen looked directly at Yinghui with a calm expression. "Mr. Ying is the one truly renowned. Why aren't you curious about how I know your name?" Yinghui turned off the tap, turned around, and his eagle-like eyes showed a gentleness that didn't match his rugged appearance. He said deliberately, "My ex-wife once searched for your name in the search engine I developed." By the time they returned home, it was already late at night. Mosheng had been generously given drinks by old Yuan and Su Min during the banquet, and when they left the hotel, she was swaying and had to be supported by Yichen. As soon as she sat in the car, she tilted her head and fell asleep. Yichen carried her back to the bedroom. Once on the bed, she automatically curled up under the covers and fell asleep. Her cheeks were flushed, and her long eyelashes were quietly drooping. Yichen stared at her for a long time before finally lowering his head and kissed her forehead. "Did he ever kiss you like this?" The low, ho. Ar's voice betrayed the emotions he had been hiding. In his eyes was a pain that he never wanted her to see when she was awake. Yichen lowered his head and breathed in the same air as Mosheng. "Had he ever been this close to you? Had he ever received your smiles and all your warmth? Had he ever?" Yichen ordered himself not to think further. But he couldn't help but feel sad that he didn't have that much broad-mindedness. He minded her wandering soul. Mosheng continued to breathe evenly. Yichen gently tucked her in, then got up and left the room, closing the door. In the deep night of November, the chill had seeped in. Even in this bustling city, there were very few people on the streets. Yinghui sat by the window of a 24-hour tea house, watching the man walking toward the tea house. The night's darkness concealed the man's elegant appearance, but his outstanding temperament still shone through. Yinghui had anticipated that the man who had left an indelible mark on Mosheng must be remarkable, but he was surprised by just how outstanding Yichen truly was. If he and Yichen were in the same era at C University, who would win and who would lose? Yinghui evaluated, taking into account his own past when he was also an outstanding figure at C University. If that were the case, maybe he would have met Mosheng first, and perhaps everything would have turned out differently. But then again, even if he had met Mosheng during his college days, he, who was once proud and arrogant, probably wouldn't have taken a liking to her. Fate truly was a strange thing. In the midst of Yinghui's thoughts, Yichen had already sat down across from him. "I thought you might be late." "I'm always punctual," Yichen said calmly, briefly glanced at the menu, then handed it back to the waiter. "Mao Jian, thank you." The waiter left to fulfill the order. Yinghui looked at him and suddenly asked, "How would you be willing to give up?" This rather provocative question didn't trigger any emotional outburst in Yi Chen as Ying Hui might have expected. He gazed steadily at Ying Hui and replied, "Mr. Ying, I don't think this question holds any practical significance." Talking to a lawyer is really headache-inducing. Ying Hui smiled wryly, leaning back in his chair with fingers intertwined. "It seems that Mosheng didn't mention me to you." The situation in the lobby earlier had already made Ying Hui aware. She didn't say much, indeed. Yi Chen had forbidden her to talk about it before, and later, Mosheng probably didn't dare to mention it, and he, too, subconsciously pushed this issue further away. This wasn't in line with his character. However, when he met Mosheng, unexpected things always happened. Ying Hui smiled again, lost in thought for a while, and then asked, "Is lawyer He interested in hearing my version of the story?" "Since I'm here, of course," Yi Chen replied. However, amid the lingering fragrance of tea, Ying Hui fell silent. Perhaps he truly didn't know where to begin with those things.